Here I am working from home just like everybody else, but I did get something fun in the mail. It is this right here, the brand new 2020 version of Apple's 13-inch MacBook Air. And now that I've had a day to play around with it, I understand it, I think, a lot better than I did even earlier this week when Apple announced a whole bunch of upgrades to both the Air and the iPad Pro. So when I got the new MacBook Air in the mail from Apple, the first thing I did was take it out of the box, and then I put it right next to the 2019 version of the MacBook Air. I looked at them side by side. Frankly, from the outside, you can't really tell the difference. They're completely identical. Then you put them next to each other, you open up both lids, that's where you start to see the difference. It's something very subtle, you're gonna have to look closely, but the keyboard on the new version is noticeably different than the keyboard on the old version, and that is because probably the single most important update here is that the MacBook Air has now moved to what they call the Magic Keyboard style. That is the style of keyboard that's in the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and it's also in the standalone Magic keyboards that Apple sells separately, or they come with an iMac. They're meant for desktop use, but you can really hook them up to anything. They're just Bluetooth keyboards, and they have a better version of the Apple keyboard than we've seen on pretty much all of the laptops for the last 3, 4, 5 years, where they all switched over to that butterfly keyboard. That's the super flat one that started in the late great 12-inch MacBook and then promulgated itself throughout the entire MacBook line. Everybody always hated it. They were fixing it. They were making it better, but people still had problems with it. The buttons wouldn't press right. They would get stuck. A little bit of dust would get in there. I'll be honest with you, it was never quite as bad as everybody said, but it wasn't good. So the fact that they're now moving everybody to this new Magic Keyboard design that frankly looks and feels a lot like the classic MacBook keyboards from years and years ago, not quite that thick and chunky, but a good halfway point between the two, I think that's a big step forward. The problem is the 16-inch MacBook Pro has this keyboard now. Now the Air has it. The 13-inch MacBook Pro does not have it. That's a little bit of the odd man out right now. I'd be hard-pressed to tell someone to buy a 13-inch Pro right now if we're waiting for that new keyboard, which really solves a lot of people's MacBook problems. That's not even, however, the most interesting or biggest news about the MacBook. Frankly, the biggest thing is it's gone back to that classic $999 price. That's what the MacBook Air always was for many years. College students loved it. People starting out in their careers loved it because it was $1,000, a hefty investment, but not as much as a lot of other premium laptops. But you got a very premium experience out of it. Frankly, it would last for years. They were built like tanks. Over time, they didn't update it as much as they should have, and a lot of Windows laptops leapfrogged it, especially around that $999 price. So when Apple finally decided to do a big overhaul of the Air in, I think, 2018, they did a very nice job, made it very much like the current MacBook Pro line, but they raised the price by a couple $100, and you really lost that psychological satisfaction of saying, oh, I got an awesome laptop for $999. So now it's back to $999, but there's a catch. There's always a catch. In this case, that base model doesn't come with the standard Core i5 Intel CPU that you would expect. Instead, it trades down to a Core i3, a dual-core version. That's usually what Airs have, but I'm a little hard-pressed to say I feel comfortable spending $1,000 on a Core i3 CPU laptop. Very often you see those chips in lower or mid-tier laptops, especially ones that go on sale around, Black Friday for doorbuster specials. However, you can upgrade to the Core i5. That's the version that I have right here. It's got a quad-core Core i5, so we're getting a quad-core Intel chip in a MacBook Air, which is great. It's an extra $100. Now, that does give me some pause. However, if you really want to get a MacBook Air, that does seem like $100 very well spent. I would definitely invest in that. If you want to upgrade the storage space or the RAM, that's going to be more expensive. Fortunately, the storage space has already doubled. For many years, MacBook Airs had 128 gigs of storage. Now the default is 256. I think that's much more in the comfort zone. You could still get the upgraded model from that and go up to 512. I think most people don't need that. 256 is perfectly adequate and will be, at least for a few years, until we start getting into more 8K video and other really big, high file size items. Now, if you want to play games on your MacBook, there are some Mac games, a bunch more games now, especially through Steam. You have the ability to do that. This guy has built-in Iris graphics from Intel. It's not the same as having a dedicated graphics chip from NVIDIA or AMD. You'll get AMD parts in the MacBook Pros. It's better than the standard built-in Intel graphics, so that should hopefully help you with a little bit of gaming or with video editing or with high-end photo editing. I run Photoshop and Illustrator and even Adobe Audition on my older MacBook Air all the time. Certainly works pretty well, but I like the idea of having some more power both in the quad-core CPU and in the Iris graphics for that. If you want to upgrade the RAM, these all start with 8 gigs of RAM. For a MacBook, you could probably get away with it because of how efficient it is and how well optimized the operating system is with the hardware and the components. On a Windows laptop, especially for $1,000 or more, you really want 16 gigs of RAM or better. Here, that's an expensive upgrade to 16 gigs. It's $200 extra, which is kind of a bummer. So I would rather spend the $100 on the CPU, although you could spend $200 on the RAM too. Then you might as well buy the higher end version of this. Then you might as well buy a MacBook Pro because you're up to $1,500 already. Even though there are a lot of differences about the new 2020 version of the MacBook Air, a lot of things are the same. The screen is the same. The basic design is completely the same. One area where we don't see any upgrades is in the ports and connections. You still got right here just the 2 USB-C ports. Those handle power and accessories and pretty much anything else you want to plug into here. Video output, you need a dongle or an adapter or something. You do still have a headphone jack, unlike most phones. So laptops have not gotten rid of those headphone jacks yet, but it's the only thing on there besides the 2 USB-C ports. More and more Windows laptops are moving to USB-C for just about everything. It's becoming more universal. People still chafe at having to carry around a bunch of dongles or adapters or extenders, and we're going to continue to live in that world until all the accessories are also USB-C, although that'll probably happen within a few years anyway. This is not the most revolutionary overhaul of the MacBook Air ever. The big change happened a couple of years ago where they updated the design and the screen and really just everything else to bring it in line with all of the other current MacBooks. That said, for something that dropped in the middle of the week with no notice, this is a pretty substantial upgrade, primarily because of, one, the price drop, number two, the CPU options. I love being able to get a quad-core chip in there. I bristle a little bit about spending more for the Core i5, but that's the world we live in. And of course, the biggest and best of that keyboard. I didn't realize how much of an improvement the new style really was until I got a chance to take the new MacBook Air, put it directly next to the old MacBook Air, type on one, and then type on the other. I'm going to find it really hard to go back to the old style now. So kudos to Apple for taking this new keyboard style and rolling it out to more products. Hopefully we'll see it on every MacBook soon.